Chapter 2. Echoes of Emerald Shuri. The power was a living thing, a feral god roaring in her blood. It tasted of ozone, grief, and the cold silence of an empty universe where Liam's warmth used to be. Alara stood in the eye of a maelstrom of her own making, the world a screaming vortex of emerald light and splintered reality. Her apothecary, her life, was being unmade around her, and the power sang a siren's song, urging her to let go, to level the street, the district, the entire city of Iridia, and scour it clean in the name of her loss. A part of her, the raw, wounded part, wanted to obey. It would be so easy. Jade lanced from her fingertips without command, crystallizing the very air. The wooden sign that had read Alara's Remedies, a gift from Liam, was caught in the blast. It transformed into a beautiful, terrible monument of translucent green crystal before exploding into a shower of glittering dust, just like the men who had done this, just like Liam's soul. The sight shocked her, a splash of ice water on her burning soul. No. This wild, untamed destruction was an insult to his memory. Liam had loved this city, its chaotic energy, its flawed but vibrant people. He had anchored her, not just to control her power, but to ground her in a life worth living. Obliterating it all would be the final betrayal. "You control," she gasped. The word swallowed by the gale, her desire was singular, desperate, to cage the beast before it devoured everything. The obstacle was the beast itself. It was her own grief, given form and terrible function. It fought her, a wild horse that had been penned for 5 years and now tasted freedom. The green, vein-like scars on her skin burned, not with the dull ache of memory, but with the searing agony of fresh wounds as they channeled a universe of raw energy. She closed her eyes, shutting out the storm. She forced herself to picture Liam's face. Not the empty void his absence left, but the crinkle of his eyes when he laughed. The way he had run a hand through his sandy hair when he was thinking, the feeling of his hand, warm and solid in hers. She clung to these memories, using them as a new temporary anchor. Gritting her teeth until her jaw ached, she drew the power inward. It was like trying to force a tidal wave back into a bottle. The energy resisted, lashing out one last time. The remains of the building's second story collapsed inwards with a deafening groan, the debris turning to jade dust before it could touch her. Then, with a final, soul-tearing effort, she forced the torrent back into the conduits of her own body. The light imploded, the vortex collapsing into her. The storm was over. The cage was closed. Silence descended, heavy and absolute. Alara stood panting in the ruin, trembling not from fear, but from the strain of containment. The power wasn't gone. It was thrumming just beneath her skin, a high-voltage current waiting for the slightest crack in her will. Her shop was gone. It was now a crater of splintered wood and pulverized stone, open to the cold night sky. Moonlight streamed down, illuminating the thin layer of emerald dust that coated everything, sparkling with a malevolent beauty. The sweet, calming scent of herbs was gone, replaced by the sharp, metallic smell of raw magic. There was no satisfaction in the fate of her attackers. The glittering dust that was all that remained of them was just another stain on the canvas of her failure. She had failed to protect the most precious thing in her life. Her gaze swept over the devastation, and that's when she saw it. Lying near the spot where the leader had stood was a piece of darkness the emerald light hadn't touched. It was a shard of obsidian, no bigger than her thumb, cool to the touch despite the residual energy in the air. It was unnaturally smooth, carved with a sigil, a stylized, cracked veil, with a single, sinister eye peering from the fissure. The Ashen Veil. The name, a half-forgotten whisper from her bloody past, solidified in her mind. They were a cult of power brokers, shadow mages, and assassins who dealt in forbidden artifacts and stolen souls. She'd clashed with their lesser agents years ago, but they had always remained in the deepest shadows. The thug's final words echoed in her memory, no longer a random taunt but a chilling declaration. The veil sends its regards. This wasn't a random break-in. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong. This was a targeted attack. They had come for the Soul Stone. They had known what it was, who she was, and what it kept sealed away. The realization struck her with the force of a physical blow. Her quiet life hadn't been an escape, it had been a temporary Christium. The wild's chaotic burn of her rage began to change. The wildfire of grief was being forged, compressed, and honed into a single, white-hot point of purpose. They hadn't just murdered her husband's memory. They had used it to unleash a weapon. They had awakened the Emerald Destroyer for their own ends. A cold, terrifying calm settled over her. The apothecary who mixed poultices and smiled at customers was dead, buried under the wreckage of her own life. With movements that were now sharp and precise, stripped of all wasted motion, Alara strode to the back of the crater, to where her bedroom floor used to be. She kicked aside a splintered beam, her boot crunching on crystallized debris. Her eyes scanned the floorboards until she found the one with the almost invisible scorch mark. Prying it open with her bare hands, the wood groaning in protest, she revealed a cavity beneath. Inside sat a long, narrow chest bound in lead. She lifted the heavy lid. There, nestled in faded black silk, was the other half of her soul. A suit of hardened leather armor, seconded and flexible, its surface reinforced with plates of jade-infused steel that seemed to drink the moonlight. Beside it lay a pair of bladed gauntlets, their edges still wickedly sharp. This was not the uniform of a healer. This was the skin of a hunter. Methodically, she began to arm herself. The familiar weight settled onto her shoulders like a shroud and a crown. Each buckle she fastened, each strap she tightened, was a deliberate act of resurrection. The soft, grieving woman was being encased in a shell of vengeance. When she was done, she stood fully armored in the heart of her own destruction. She clenched her fists, the gauntlets creaking softly. The untamed power within her pulsed in response, no longer a chaotic storm, but a contained and focused weapon, humming in harmony with her cold intent. Alara looked up at the fractured moon hanging in the viridian sky. Her emerald eyes, stripped of all warmth, glowed with a faint, predatory light. The hunt was on.